This is going to be a short tale full of woe, but it does need a little bit of setup. Hello everybody, I am Ben from Team Panic. So for a while, especially since I've been building meltybrains, I've wanted to do a robot called Triple Cheese Melt. And the idea being that it is a multi-bot of meltybrain robots, specifically 3 of them to make up the weight class. Now James of Broken Link Robotics, whose YouTube channel I will link down below, convinced me to do this for Robot Havoc after having heard me talk about it for a little while now. And the idea was that I was going to build one, he was going to build one, and Steve, who fights in Adelaide often, was also going to build one. And that was going to combine together to become Triple Cheese Melt, building 3 beetles to make a hobby weight. Well, close enough to beetles, 1.8 kilos to make a hobby weight robot. I personally intended to make Craft Single, a fully brand new meltybrain designed from scratch specifically for fighting as Triple Cheese Melt. Unfortunately, in my last video, you saw me build this, a currently unnamed 1/3 of Triple Cheese Melt that I had to rush put together out of spare parts because I ran out of time to get Craft Single working. For his part, Steve built Gorgonzola, a meltybrain based on the Open Melt system. And unfortunately, James from Broken Link Robotics was unable to get his meltybrain running in time, which meant that going into our first fight at Robot Havoc, Triple Cheese Melt was already down to being a double cheese melt, and one of those was my boy, who was very, very slapped together and had basically only just made safety by the skin of its teeth. To throw a little bit more oil on this fire, our first fight up was against Torn, a hobby weight that Steve, the driver and builder of Gorgonzola, also drove and built, which meant that our very first fight up, it was me driving my meltybrain and his son Nath driving Gorgonzola. Okay. So that was nothing. That wasn't a fight. That was like 10 seconds of blah. And that is because of the rush build. It's a thing that I should have been aware of, and it's a thing that I very, very easily fixed. Basically, I have in the bottom of this meltybrain a Teensy 4. Teensies are a microcontroller. On the board that they come on, they have a little button. You push that button, it shoots the Teensy over into bootloader mode. It stops running the code that you have written and put into the Teensy, and it just sits there waiting for you to download new code. You don't actually need the button. The programming app can do that all on its own anyway, and I had forgotten about the button's existence. In my haste to build the robot, I just didn't do anything about it. So I had the board right at the bottom and a battery sitting on top of it. So all Torn had to do was hit me once, pop me up in the air and drop me back down. And that was enough for the battery to hit the button and flick the whole robot over into bootloader mode, effectively shutting it down. And not only that, he did that in exactly the right spot to pin Gorgonzola into the corner, and Gorgonzola being an open melt design, as far as I know, it does not have a tank steering mode, so he could not get himself out of that particular predicament where basically I was jammed up against him and also jamming his chains down, which meant that he would be unable to free himself from the corner. So that fight was over incredibly quickly because, again, this was a very, very rushed build and I had forgotten that. Now, you might think, with how critical that was and the fact that I hadn't done the fix for it, that it might be a really difficult thing to fix. No, it's really not. I literally, after this fight, took a pair of side cutters to that button and it was one snip. And that was basically it. I mean, I had to fish a few button components back out of the robot because a couple of them kind of like disappeared into the wiring loom and I had to like fish them back out to make sure they didn't short anything. But yeah, I just snipped those, added some hot glue to it, and then it was good to go again and shouldn't ever have that problem again. Which is good because we have another fight coming up, and this time it is up against Agile Alloy, which is just a steel brick with a really good drive system.
3, 2, 1, fight.
So before we talk about the fight, I should address the RC car in the room. That was an RC car that you will see more of at a later date, but it was being driven by Nath, who drove Gorgonzola in the first fight, and it was basically there because, look, we had a whole extra 1.8 kilos that we could do something with, and we decided that we didn't actually want to throw somebody else's beta weight in there, just in case it got too damaged to continue fighting in the beta weight league. So we threw in an RC car that was in the pits. And again, you will see more about the RC car in a future video, I am sure of that. Now let's talk about this fight in particular. Agile Alloy, as its name suggested before we got into this fight, is a very fast little robot. Well, not even little, one of the biggest things you can fight in Adelaide at this point in time. And it has a very, very good drive system in it. I was very lucky that I managed to escape the box rush that he did. It was a very, very good line drive box rush. But of course, the advantage of being a multi-bot is that you can't box rush all of us. You have to hit one of us at some point. And so Gorgonzola got trapped in the corner and I was able to gate on by and get into the middle of the box and spin up. Now, I did not even really get a chance to do anything. I didn't even really get to translate in this fight. I got to spin up. I was just about to make some movement and do some translating when Agile Alloy came and chased me down and gave me a nice little tap. At which point, my unnamed meltybrain here exploded because it was made of old meltybrains and it was running way too much weight in the teeth. I'm not sure that I mentioned this in the build video for this thing, but the teeth themselves are like 800 grams a shot, and then the HDPE and all the electronics and everything else is like 600 grams, maybe 700 grams. So it is spinning twice as much mass at the edges as it is in the center. And one of the downsides to that particular thing is that it was dishing out a lot of energy and it could not take that much energy. It shattered right through the 6mm top plate, admittedly in a stress concentrated area where this old design that was not very good, had a lot of holes and things in a very thin area, but it still did manage to shatter all of that through and pull the entire section of wall out of the robot that holds one of the drive motors, basically trapping it on its side and in a weird angle so that the other motor had nowhere near enough power to do anything at all. A Melty should spin on one wheel, but yeah, as you could see from the rest of that fight footage, it did nothing. And that is because, yeah, I'd put way too much weight on the end of this thing, and it is a very, very hefty boy in this particular configuration. And yeah, so it was the one wheel was trying to drag up too much weight and also drag up the damaged wheel at all, which refuses to move basically. So it was never going to work and I was out of the fight. But of course that did leave us with Gorgonzola and also the RC car, although realistically the RC car is probably not doing a lot for us. Our rules in ARC are that you basically need to knock out over 50% of the weight to win the fight. So if you knock out this and Gorgonzola, then you win the fight. And unfortunately, earlier on, Agile Alloy had pushed a spinning Gorgonzola into the corner, and it seemed to have got tangled up on its own chain a little bit, making it hard for it to get up to speed again, hard for it to get spinning. And then when the pit went down, he was unfortunately sitting there with one wheel over the pit and got immobilized. At that point, we were the last fight of the session, and we still had a little bit of time, so the announcer allowed the fight to continue. But effectively we were out at that point. I mean, it was fun to watch as Agile Alloy chased down a very speedy, hard to control RC car, but realistically, most of the weight of the robot had actually been eliminated, so we had already lost the fight. And I'm sure that had the RC car not gone down the pit, it would have been called a loss for us officially, even if it had not been announced that way to the audience at the time. So yeah, as mentioned, this was a short one and the fights were short, and that is because I thoroughly underestimated how much energy was actually going to be in this hobby weight class and this particular set of weapons. It was a lot. It was far, far, far too much. It was also hampered by a rush build, which caused me to, miss a very simple electronics issue that did in fact occur in the first fight. It was slightly frustrating, but sometimes that is combat robots. Sometimes you do what you can in the time you have before an event, and it is just not quite enough. Having said that, Craft Single, the robot that was supposed to be here instead of whatever this thing is, will get made at some point in the future. I do like the idea of doing a more conventional meltybrain, which is what this is. It is more of a conventional meltybrain, just to kind of get my head a little bit more around the translation mechanics and things. Because from the very little that I did see of the performance of this particular robot, I was pretty happy with how it tracked heading and how it was performing while spun up. So it would be interesting to take all of this, and especially the brain board, and stick it into something that might actually survive the hits that it dishes out to somebody else. Anyway, that is going to be it for this particular video. There are more videos for Robot Havoc coming. So if you're interested and want to see more of the things that happened at Robot Havoc, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Which is a multi-bot made of melties. In particular, 3 meltybrain Agile Alloy. My God, that's so hard to say.